If you grew up with an alcoholic parent, I'll bet you know this feeling. There was often a moment growing up when the room would change suddenly. Nothing dramatic happened necessarily. Someone from outside your family probably wouldn't have noticed anything at all, but you noticed because you knew what to look for. A slurred word, a shift in tone, maybe a look in their eyes. And before you had time to think about it, your body would just react. Your chest would tighten, your stomach would drop, and the thought would hit, oh no, here we go again. That's a feeling that stays with you even as an adult. Something small can happen, something other people wouldn't even notice, but you start to feel like you did as a child, like things are about to go wrong and you're not going to be able to stop them. And all of those same feelings overwhelm you all over again. And over time, you start to lose trust in your instincts. So instead of asking, what's happening in this moment that causes me to react like this, you start asking, what's wrong with me? Am I overreacting? Why do I respond to things like this? That's the question that a brother and sister whose names I've changed are asking in this particular case file. We'll call them Josh and Sara. And here's the question that Josh and Sara are asking. Were we wrong for walking out of a family Christmas celebration when our mom had a glass of wine? Now, I want to just give you a little bit of background about this so that you can kind of understand the context. When this particular event happens, Josh is 21 years old and his sister Sara is 19. Now, 8 years before that, when Josh was just 13 years old, his father sat him down and he told him something that no child should have to hold. He told him that his mom was an alcoholic and that he, Dad, was leaving for good. And that meant that someone would need to watch out for Sara when things got bad. So at just 13 years old, Josh became the adult. And as you can imagine, there were years of chaos, years of missed responsibilities. At one point, Mom was drunk as she drove them to school, and she crashed the car. And eventually, Josh and Sara had to move in with their dad. But eventually, their mom got sober, and she stayed sober for 5 years until that fateful Christmas morning. Sara goes to Josh crying, and she said, Mom's drinking again. And the explanation was simple. Mom was stressed. Family was coming over. Mom's own sister suggested a glass of wine just to calm her nerves. That's when Josh and Sara walked out. Now, if you grew up in a family with an addiction, you probably know what comes next. Almost immediately, their phones start to blow up. Family members are furious at them. They call them selfish, dramatic, cruel. And that's what prompted their question. Were we wrong for walking out? Now, before I answer that, I would love to know how you would respond to Josh and Sara. Let me know in the comment section below. Because from the outside, Josh and Sara's reaction could look like an overreaction. It's one glass of wine, one moment on a holiday. What's the big deal? But that's only true if you don't know or if you ignore the history. Because when you grow up with an alcoholic parent, there is always history in the room. You don't just remember bad days. You remember the unpredictability, the terror, the sense that you're responsible for keeping everything together, and you don't have that kind of power. So that glass of wine wasn't just a drink. To Josh and Sara, this was like a trajectory that was going someplace. Alarms were going off. They've lived this story before. But in families affected by addiction, there's often an unspoken rule that you might be very familiar with. Don't talk about it. Don't make it visible. Pretend it isn't happening. As long as everyone stays at the table, as it were, the system holds. But when someone leaves, when someone refuses to play along, well, the illusion breaks. And that's when the pressure shows up. So when the family says to Josh and Sara, you should have stayed, what they're really saying is, your instincts are bad. You shouldn't trust yourself. But that's not support. That's the preservation of denial. So the question is, were Josh and Sara wrong? And the answer is no. They didn't overreact. And let's be clear, they weren't trying to punish Mom. Leaving was about refusing to participate in a family system that was built around protecting an addiction instead of the person with the addiction and the people who were closest to them. Josh and Sara's aunt was the one who suggested the glass of wine. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt that she wasn't trying to send her sister into a downward spiral, but recommending alcohol to someone in recovery, especially someone under stress, ignores the reality of addiction. And notice who gets blamed. Not the addiction, not the enabling, but the people who refuse to stay silent. Of course, Josh and Sara didn't ruin Christmas. You can understand why they would wonder if they were wrong after all the pressure that they received. But they're not responsible for managing their mom's sobriety. But there's another question that Josh and Sara didn't ask. And that's, how do we hold boundaries without cutting ourselves off emotionally from our mom? Well, here's a way that they could do that. Here's a way they could set a boundary for their mom and for themselves and do it without cutting themselves off. They could say something like, "Mom, we love you. And so when drinking is present, we can't stay. That's not us trying to punish you. It's just what we need to feel safe." And you see, the beauty of that is that there's no accusations, no debates about intent, just clarity. If you come from a home with an addiction, I hope you will hear this. Boundaries are not demands for change. They're statements about participation. You can't force someone with an addiction to change. That has to be their choice, but you can say, "I won't participate in your addiction." Now, if this case resonated with you, I'll link a few related case files below. And if you've ever been blamed for protecting yourself, especially in a family touched by addiction, I would really love to hear your experience in the comments section below. People are complicated, and relationships with people are hard. They're worth it, but they're hard. And especially in the age of AI, the ability to build healthy human connection is still one of the most important skills that we have, and it always will be. If that's something that you want to develop further, hit subscribe. Really glad you were here, and I'll catch you in the next video.